Jungkook stared at the phone, his heart pounding, his face full of shock and pain. His hands started to tremble uncontrollably as he scrolled through the photos. His mind refused to believe what he was seeing. The phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Jimin rushed to him, seeing the broken look on Jungkook's face. Jimin, Jungkook, calm down. We don't know the full story yet. Let's figure this out. He said worried, but Jungkook wasn't listening. His voice came out trembling, filled with confusion and pain. Jungkook, this has to be wrong. This can't be right, Jimin. It doesn't make sense. He whispers desperately. Jimin, we need to talk to Van. Don't jump to conclusions just yet. Maybe there's an explanation, he says, trying to calm him. But Jungkook couldn't wait any longer. Without another word, he rushed out of the room, his mind in chaos. He sprinted to his car, and Jimin, worried for his friend, quickly followed. He got into the passenger seat, knowing he couldn't leave Jungkook alone in this state. As Jungkook drove, his emotions swirled wildly, with hurt, confusion, and anger. The images of Vine kissing Taeyang played over and over in his head. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, his eyes red from the storm of emotions inside him. Jungkook, how could this happen? How could she do this to me? He said, thinking to himself. He slammed the car door shut as soon as they arrived at Vine's house. Without hesitation, he stormed inside, his heart racing, his breath heavy. He called out for her, his voice filled with hurt and frustration. Jungkook, Vine, where are you? Come here, now. Vine came out, her face pale, clearly upset, but before she could even open her mouth to speak, Jungkook cut her off, his desperation clear in his voice. Jungkook, see Vine, he said with a forced laugh. They are all talking nonsense, saying you are in these photos with them. Vine stayed silent, not saying a word, her expression unchanged as Jungkook's laughter faded. Jungkook, just tell me it's not you in the photo. Say it's fake and I'll believe you. I'll fight the rumors. I'll stand by you. Just tell me it's not true. He asked, almost pleading with her. Vine stood there, frozen. She wanted to explain, but the look on Jungkook's face, the pain, the desperation, left her speechless. Her silence only made Jungkook panic. Jungkook, Vine, you don't need to be afraid. I'm with you. I'll stand by you, no matter what. Just tell me you are not in those photos. His voice breaking with each word. Vine finally spoke, her voice soft and filled with guilt. She quietly whispers, Vine, it's me in the photos, but. Before she could finish her sentence, Jungkook's face crumbled. She reached out to touch his hand, to explain, but he quickly pulled away from her, rejecting her touch. Jungkook, don't touch me, he whispers angrily. Vian's heart broke at that moment. Tears welled up in her eyes as she saw how deeply she had hurt him. Jungkook, why, Vian? Why didn't you tell me? How could you let this happen? His voice trembled, full of hurt. Vian tried to speak, but her voice cracked as tears streamed down her face. Vian, Jungkook, it's not what you think. Please let me explain. Jungkook's face was a mix of anger and sadness. His chest felt heavy, and his heart ached like never before. Jungkook, I trusted you. I was ready to spend my life with you, he said quietly, almost to himself. Vian watched him, helpless, as her tears fell. She knew she had to explain, but in that moment, nothing she said could undo the pain he was feeling. Jungkook, too hurt to listen, just stood there, unable to process what had happened. His whole world had turned upside down, and all he could feel was the deep aching wound left by the betrayal. Jungkook stood there, his eyes darkened with a mix of fury and heartache. He could barely control the storm of emotions that was raging inside him. His love for Van was colliding violently with the betrayal he believed he saw in the photos. His hands clenched tightly at his side, trying to stop himself from breaking down, but he couldn't hold back any longer. His voice trembling, filled with bitterness. Jungkook, you must have enjoyed it, didn't you? Watching a mafia leader, someone everyone fears, someone no one dares to cross, running around at your back and call like a lovesick puppy. He spat the words, each one dripping with anger, as if they burned in his throat. The pain in his chest was unbearable, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation he felt. He had laid his heart bare for her, given her everything, and now he felt like a fool. He raised his voice. Jungkook, I was so stupid, so blind. I thought you were different. I thought you cared about me. But no, you were probably laughing behind my back the whole time, watching me jump through hoops for you. A mafia leader who feared by everyone, acting like an idiot for you. Vian's face twisted with shock, her tear filled eyes widening. She shook her head, trying to make him stop, to make him understand that none of this was true. Vian, no, Jungkook, that's not true. Please just listen to me. But Jungkook couldn't hear her anymore. His mind was drowning in thoughts of betrayal. Every time he closed his eyes, all he could think was Vian with Taeyang. Jungkook, you must have loved it. Seeing me, a man who's supposed to be in control, doing everything for you, like a fool. I've risked everything for you, and for what? So you could make me look like a joke. His voice laced with anger and disbelief.
Man, no, Jungkook, you're wrong. Please don't say that, she said, sobbing while shaking her head. She took a hesitant step towards him, her heart breaking as she saw the anger and hurt in his eyes. But Jungkook immediately stepped back, his face hardening even more, as if her presence only intensified his pain. Jungkook, don't. Don't come near me. I don't want to see your face right now, he said coldly. His words cut through her like a knife. Vian froze in her place, her hand reaching out to him, but she couldn't bring herself to take another sip. The man who had once looked at her with nothing but love was now looking at her as if she was a stranger, someone who had shattered his heart beyond repair. Jungkook stood there, his breath heavy, his body trembling from the mix of emotions he was feeling. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust her, but the images in his mind wouldn't let him. The pain of seeing her with someone else was too much to bear. Jungkook's mind was clouded with pain and anger to accept them. He looked at her one last time, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and betrayal. Jungkook, it's over. We are done, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. His heart felt like it was being ripped apart. Why? Jungkook, please don't do this. Let me explain. But it was too late. Jungkook's heart had already shattered, and there was nothing she could say to fix it. He turned away from her, his mind made up, his heart aching with every step he took. Without turning back, he said, Jungkook, you made your choice. As he walked out of the room, Vian collapsed to the floor, her sobs filling the empty space where Jungkook had just stood. She wanted to chase after him, to make him see the truth, but she was too broken to move. Everything was falling apart, and she didn't know how to stop it. Meanwhile, Jungkook walked away, his heart heavy with grief and anger. He had loved her with everything he had, and now that love felt like a weight pulling him down. As much as he wanted to believe her, he couldn't ignore what he had seen. The photos, the betrayal, they haunted him, and there was no going back. After days of trying to reach Jungkook, Vine arrived at the college campus. her heart heavy with hope that maybe today would be different. Just as she stepped onto the sidewalk, a car sped towards her at full speed. She froze, but the car came to sudden halt just a few inches before it could hit her. Her heart was racing, but it stopped altogether when she saw Jungkook step out of the car. She whispered his name softly, her face lightening up with happiness after not seeing him for so many years. Van, Jungkook, she whispers with a hopeful smile, a broad smile across her face, her heart leaping with joy at the sight of him. She took a step towards him, hoping this was the moment they could finally talk. But just as she did, Jungkook walked right past her without even glancing in her direction. It was as if she didn't exist, as if she were a complete stranger to him now. Vine's smile faltered, her step slowing as she watched him walk over to the other side of the car. Her eyes followed him in confusion, but then her heart dropped when she saw him open the door for Anna, his face softening into a warm smile. Vine, Jungkook. Her voice barely made a sound as she watched them, frozen in shock. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Jungkook, the same man who once made her feel like she was his whole world, was now treating her like she was nothing. Jungkook, come on, sweetheart, I'll see you after classes, he said in a sweet voice to Anna. Vine's chest tightened, and tears welled up in her eyes. Sweetheart, that was what Jungkook used to call her. Hearing him say it to someone else so casually felt like a knife twisting in her heart. Van, sweetheart, he used to call me that. Her voice trembled. She stood there, her body froze as her mind raced. How could things have changed so much? How could he act like she didn't matter at all? Jungkook, sensing Van's eyes on him, finally glanced her way, but his gaze was cold, empty, as if he was looking at a stranger. Van's breath caught in her throat, her tears threatening to fall. She had never seen him look at her like that before. He didn't say anything, just watched her with a hardened expression before turning back to Anna. Vine stood there, unable to move, her eyes following his every move. Just as he was about to leave, she noticed Taeyang walking towards her. Jungkook's entire posture stiffened, his jaw clenched, his fists tightening until his knuckles turned white. His tongue poked against the inside of his cheek, a clear sign of the anger bubbling up inside him. He kept his cold eyes trained on Taeyang, watching them both from a distance. Vian's heart raced in panic as she saw Taeyang coming closer. She didn't want to cause more misunderstandings. She didn't want Jungkook to think something else was going on. Vian, Taeyang, I don't think we should talk right now. Please just go, she said nervously. Taeyang, Vian, I just want to talk. Vian shook her head quickly, glancing over at Jungkook. His eyes were still on them, cold and unreadable. Her stomach twisted in knots as she watched him turn away, his face filled with fury as he suddenly rushed back to his car. Van's tear finally spilled over as she watched Jungkook drive off, leaving her standing there. The man who once would have moved heaven and earth for her now acted as though she didn't even exist. Van stood there, tears streaming down her face as she watched Jungkook drive away. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She loved him. She had been trying to deny it, but now watching him act as if she didn't even exist, it was painfully clear. Van, I love him, she whispers to herself, her voice breaking. Her heart ached with the truth. She loved Jungkook, not Taeyang, not anyone else. It had always been him, but now it seemed like it was too late. He didn't look at her with love anymore. His eyes were cold, distant, and full of anger. Vine wiped her tears as the memory of how Jungkook used to be with her flashed in her mind. The way he would smile at her, the way he cared for her, the way he always made her feel special. She had taken it all for granted, and now it was gone. Jungkook, the man she had come to love deeply, now treated her as though she was nothing, as though she didn't matter anymore. The pain of losing him was overwhelming, and it felt like her heart was shattering into a million pieces. Van, he doesn't even care about me anymore. She stood there, broken and alone, knowing that the love she had finally realized was slipping away from her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Time skip. Jungkook arrived at the college to pick up Anna, his eyes briefly scanning the campus before they landed on Van. He spotted her standing in the distance, her gaze lingering on him as she watched him with Anna. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arm around Anna, leaning in closer and speaking to her softly, his voice dripping with affection. Jungkook, come on, Anna, let's go. We have got a lot to do today, he said with a fake loving tone. Vian, who had been watching them from afar, couldn't take it anymore. Her heart clenched painfully in her chest as she saw how sweetly Jungkook was acting with Anna. It was too much for her to bear. She quickly turned away, not wanting to see any more, and hurried off, trying to escape the sight of the man she loved, treating someone else like that. As soon as Van was out of sight, Jungkook's expression shifted. His smile faded, and the warmth in his voice was gone. He turned to Anna, his eyes cold and hard. Jungkook, you can leave now, Anna, he said in a cold voice. Anna blinked in confusion, taken aback by his sudden change in tone. Anna, but aren't you going to call me sweetheart like before? She said, pouting. Jungkook's eyes darkened. Without warning, he grabbed her jaw tightly, his fingers digging into her skin. Anna's eyes widened in fear as she saw the fury in his glare. Jungkook, don't you dare call yourself my sweetheart again. If I'm being nice to you, it's for a reason. But don't test my patience, Anna, he said in a low and dangerous voice. Anna gulped, the fear evident in her eyes. She quickly nodded, her voice trembling. Anna, okay, I won't. I'm sorry. Jungkook released her jaw, his glare still sharp. Anna didn't waste another second, turning on her heel and practically running away from him. Jungkook sighed, running a hand through his hair, the tension slowly leaving his body now that she was gone. He then made his way to the principal's office. After knocking, he entered the room and sat across from the principal. The two exchanged a brief conversation, discussing something that seemed important and private. Principal, I understand, Mr. John. I'll make sure everything is taken care of, just as you have instructed. Jungkook stood up, his face unreadable, but there was a glint in his eyes as he reached out to shake the principal's hand. Jungkook, I hope you won't disappoint me. Do exactly what I have said, he said, smirking. The principal gave him a firm nod, shaking Jungkook's hand with a slight bow of respect. As Jungkook walked out of the office, his smirk remained. To be continued.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.